Okay, so now let's talk about the rest of the basics panel. And I'm going to take you through quickly what the sliders do in this one, but then we're going to go into more detail in the following lessons, so that there's certain ones in here that you kind of scratch your head about what does that do, where some of the sliders are pretty self-explanatory. We've done the white balance, so now we're into tone over here. And before I even start, let's say I've got this set up and I've got some sliders here and here from something that I did before or whatever. Quick shortcut, if you want to reset your sliders on any of these panels, just go to the name up above the section and double click, and it resets all the sliders back to the middle. Now, in the past, if you were going to come in here and work these, most people tend to go and grab the exposure and fix the exposure and then the contrast, and they start working their way down this way, and maybe they'll get to the whites and the blacks. But usually they do all the adjustments up there. Let's reset this. I want to suggest to you, starting from the bottom of this section, work your way up, because the most important thing to do is set your white and your blacks so there's no clipping in your image. What clipping means is you've either gone so bright or so dark that there's no information left to see. There's no detail. The sky's so blown out it's white, so if you were to print it, there would be no ink put on the paper. Or it's so dark that it's just completely black and there's no details in there. And that's what you've got going on with your histogram up here. That's this thing right up here. It's showing you the dispersion of red and green and the coloring and the brightness that you've got in your image. And you can see how it's going from the blacks over to the shadows over to your white. And you can determine that, you can rearrange that. If I drag the whites over here, watch what happens. The white's going over to the right. If I drag it this way, it's going over to the left. And what that is doing is it's moving where the lightest point is on the image. It's saying, I want the lightest point to only be this bright. Well, the whole thing is, if you turn these little icons on up here, these are called clipping warnings. And so what happens, let's say I take the black and I start dragging it this way. Look what happens to the buffalo. This blue globule comes up there, and it's showing me that if I print this right now, it's going to have no detail in that face. I've clipped it too deep. It's too dark. If I come the other way and I bring the whites and I start going like this, the red appears and says, I've clipped the sky. It's too bright. It's not going to work out well. And so it's just a way to give you a warning of the fact that you've pushed things too far. Notice that my histogram up here has, what it's done is it's pushed everything over to the right side, and it's gone off the edge. It's saying that the white has gone off the edge of what's available there. Same thing over on the shadows. If I clip it over that way, if I take this, let's work the exposure a little bit. You notice that it starts moving things to the left. If I go to the left, and it moves things to the right if I go to the right. You see how the brights over on the right side are getting smushed against the edge there. That's all basically what the histogram is showing you. Is that's what's going on. Okay, so now that's why it's so important to set your whites and your blacks to make sure you don't have any clipping, because what it will allow you to do is have the most amount of contrast that you can get in that image without blowing it out, either one way or the other. But if I hit J, that's kind of the shortcut for showing the clipping and taking it off. You see they light up, those little icons up top light up with J. But there's an easier way to do this. I can, instead of turn those on and off, I can just simply hold the Alt or Option key when I'm using my blacks. And as soon as color starts to pop up, that's showing me where it's clipping. As soon as I just drop right past where the coloring is, it's no longer clipping. Same thing with the white. Just holding my Alt or Option, I can dial in exactly where that edge of the clipping starts, and I let go. And that's how we've been doing it for a while. That's been a great shortcut to get the white and the blacks as good as you can. But now the auto has gotten so good in this basics module for the tone, I just clip auto and it sets the white and the black points the perfect spot for them. Notice there's no clipping going on, but it gives me the widest range in the histogram from the left to the right. And that's why I want to start at the bottom, but actually now I go up and say I hit auto, and then it's just a couple quick tweaks of the rest of it. Shadows. I can open up the faces of the buffalo. This is a warning though. Shadows tend to be where a lot of noise hides, so the more you open up the shadows, chances for more noise to come in. Highlights, if the sky's too bright or the brightest areas, I can tone them down a little bit. I love highlights and shadows to help recover a lot of stuff, and this is where you get more flexibility in RAW instead of JPEG, but they're great to play with. And so now look what happens. I just do a little tweaking of the contrast maybe, and I barely have to do anything now with with exposure. I could bring it down a little bit or I could raise it up, but I've worked from auto and then worked my way up. Now I don't even touch blacks and whites like I used to. That was a little bit laborious to do that alt and option stuff. Now it's just one click and then a quick slide of the shadows, the highlights, a little contrast, a little exposure, and I'm done with that section of toning my image. Now I can add a little clarity, which kind of gives a great sense of detail. It sharpens midtones, and we'll talk about that more. Vibrance boosts up dull colors in the image while not cranking up the bright colors, the saturated colors as much, where saturation really cranks up everything and can go nuclear. So we'll talk about that a little more. So those are kind of quick little things that I would do every time I open up an image. I'm going to come in here, set my white balance, boom, auto, and then I'm just going to do a quick little, let's open up that a little bit more, a little contrast, and I like that setup. And my contrast, my clarity is a little too much, vibrance like that, and boom, I'm done with my developing of the image as far as setting the base to it. I haven't added any extra little creative effects or stuff like that, but I've now gotten my image to the best development that I can using the basics panel. And that's what you're going to do over and over again. But the good news is also that you can automate a lot of this so that you can be even closer to this statement, this place in your imagery, a lot faster without having to move a lot of sliders. Also, one more thing, once you get it to where you like your image, you can compare it to the original. You just hit your backslash key, shows before up in the right hand corner, and this is after. Notice how it's opened up the faces of the buffaloes and stuff like that. This is to get you to that base level of starting to have the proper exposure and everything look right in your image. Now we're going to start tweaking it a little more once we understand how some of these sliders work a little bit better.